well-known proponents of globalization and reforms. It's such a pleasure to have with us in our studio Professor Jagdish Bhagwati. Professor Bhagwati, many thanks for sparing time to be with us here on NDTV.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let me start by getting your views on something, a trend that has clearly dominated Indian politics, Indian economics over the last few weeks and continues to be, shall we say, a big worrying factor for policymakers, the anti-corruption crusade. How do you think it's really playing out in India, and do you see it having far-reaching consequences?
I think corruption is a debilitating factor, there's no question in my mind. The kind of corruption we've had, though, is different, say, from the Chinese one. In the Chinese case, we have what I call profit-sharing consumption. So if there's a milkshake, you get your son or daughter or nephew or niece to put a straw into the milkshake, so they manage to drink from it.
Okay,
so the commissars who are doing this have an interest in increasing the size of the milkshake.
Right.
Ours was what I call rent seeking, rent creating. So, you know, I mean, you know how.
But how badly does it hurt growth? And has India's growth
hurts
been
very
badly
because our whole system was being run on the basis of creating rents. Not that that was the intention necessarily, but that was actually the outcome. We had so many restrictions, so we were generating enormous windfall profits. If you got a license, you would immediately have access to large profits.
Right.
So the whole system was actually undermined. So when we go after corruption, actually if we look at what Hazare and others are saying, they're not saying like the Occupy movement in America,
sure,
which is to attack reforms, to attack growth. Here it's exactly the other way around, to be fair to these people in the streets. They're saying extend the reforms, like on the 2G scam, etc., through auctions, extend them to areas where it happens to have been bypassed.
Okay.
And therefore, you will have less corruption as a result. So actually, our anti-corruption movement is one which is pro-growth.
It's not necessarily anti-reform or anti-growth.
No, on the contrary. On the contrary, if you look at what they're asking for, they want more reforms, not less.
Okay.
Because our reforms consist in dismantling this terrible state where people were just given sinecures all the time.
So we'll talk in detail about reforms and the government's attempt at least at pushing forward some of the reforms, but staying with the whole corruption theme, do you see these movements really having an impact, or do you think nothing's going to change in the system?
Oh, I think it does. And I think the main lesson, of course, as I was explaining from my own perspective, is that they realize, that the UPA government, and in fact all governments will realize, no matter which one, that they have to dismantle more. They've got to use more auctions, which is another way of saying, I just don't hand it over to my brother-in-law or my son-in-law.
Right.
I mean, it's
so
known
transparent
as
policy.
Transparent politics. And then allowing people to compete for these things.
Sure.
Right. So that is what we really are into. Now, so in that sense, I would say that the system is actually beneficial. And I'm glad that these people are going out onto the streets. And so I think that has put pressure on the UPA government, which is the government in power, more or less, right, at least at the center. I think they saw the handwriting on the wall.
Sure.
So my sense is that for the last many years, because of this division of power between the party and the prime minister, which my wife is a well-known Russian expert, and she told me this was exactly the old Russian model, where the party secretary, like Khrushchev, was much more important, and Brezhnev, who ran the country, was not.
So do you think that's something that's actually held back growth?
I think this division has certainly held back the movement towards reforms. Now, I think the people around, I mean, well, you might as well say Mrs. Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, who are on the political side, and the Prime Minister was feeling extremely uncomfortable. I think they finally saw, as a result of all these agitations and so on, and because people started saying this was a wipeout, you know, for the last 20 years, nothing was happening. So they saw the handwriting on the wall. That is my theory. And so, you know, there's an English saying which says that nothing clears your mind as much as the prospect of hanging.
Absolutely.
And so suddenly they said, my God, our whole role in history will be undermined if we don't now move forward. So far it was like, I mean, the analogy I use is a cart
Okay.
which is stuck in the monsoon mud. It neither moves backward nor forward.
Okay.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.